Hi, my name is Adina and I'm starting this channel to educate women about menopause. I had a really awful time when I entered this phase of life, and the worst thing about it was that I didn't even know that it was or perimenopause, because what I experienced were not the classic stuff like hot flashes. And to add to that, the doctors had no clue either. They didn't know either, and frankly, they should have. I will talk more about this in another episode. But for now, suffice it to say that I survived. And the reason I think I survived is that I'm a nerd and I love researching. Honestly, it feels like that's what saved me. I can get very intellectually curious about an unsolved problem, and then I spend hours on the internet and read all the studies. Statistics and numbers are really fascinating to me. So when I was going through this, I subscribed to all sorts of academic databases like PubMed, JSTOR, EBSCO, etc. And I learned a lot. And I synthesized all that knowledge. And I'm here to relay all that crystallized knowledge so you don't have to read the articles. Maybe that could be my slogan. Hi, I'm Adina, and I read all the research, so you don't have to. At any rate, when I refer to an article, I'll put the link for it somewhere on this page. Where exactly will be determined by the platform where you watch it, and I still need to figure that out. For this first episode, I want to talk about cycling HRT. HRT meaning hormone replacement therapy. Why did I choose this topic? Because I noticed in menopause support groups that there isn't that much awareness of it, or women may think it's too complicated to manage, and doctors rarely ever mention it as an option to menopausal women. So, what is cycling HRT? To begin with, there are two basic types of HRT, static and cycling, which is also referred to as rhythmic or sequential regimen. In the static setup, women take estradiol and progesterone continuously at the same dose each day. Estradiol is the most important type of estrogen. Estradiol. Whatever. From now on, I will just refer to it as estrogen for the sake of simplicity, and also because a lot of women take two different types of estrogen anyway. Most women feel that it is estrogen that is the most important part of HRT, and truthfully, although progesterone has a lot of positive effects, it's estrogen that does the heavy lifting in terms of menopausal symptom relief, such as diminished hot flashes, enhance brain function, lift your mood, protect your bones, etc. And some women react poorly to progesterone, and I'll talk about that too in another video. So why do we need to take progesterone at all? Because progesterone limits the growth of the endometrium, that is the lining of the womb. Estrogen signals for the lining to thicken to prepare it for a possible pregnancy, and progesterone controls the growth so that it doesn't get out of hand and become a problem. Now, let's look at this chart, which shows the monthly fluctuation of hormones in our reproductive years. The red line represents estrogen, and the blue line represents progesterone. What do you notice about the first half of the cycle? That there's hardly any progesterone present. It only starts coming in the second half of the cycle to put the brakes on estrogen. So, the static phase basically resembles a continuous luteal phase. The cycling method aims to copy the entire female cycle. Actually, I should say the cycling approach, because there are several different methods under the umbrella of cycling. For example, the Wiley method replicates the 28-day cycle. It prescribes exactly how much estrogen and progesterone cream you need to put on each day in order to achieve that ebb and flow of hormones we saw on the chart. Then there's another way to cycle, which doesn't have a name to it, but you basically use the same amount of estrogen throughout the month, and then you add progesterone in the second half of the month. You stop the progesterone at the end of the month, and you have a withdrawal bleeding. The withdrawal bleeding is like a menstrual bleeding we used to have. The womb sheds the thickened lining, which was prepared for a possible pregnancy. The bleeding is unfortunately a must for cycling methods because you need to regularly shed your endometrium if you are using unopposed estrogen, just like nature did. But truthfully, a lot of women struggle with breakthrough bleeding or spotting even on the static method, and cycling solves that problem as well. So now I will tell you how I do it because it's a bit more convenient than the methods I described before, and there are certain benefits to it. I take estrogen for 3 months, and I add progesterone 2 weeks before the end of the 3 months. Then, at the end of the 3 months, I stop all hormones for a week and I bleed. After the bleeding subsides, I start it all over again. I also take testosterone, but that's another story. I don't want to get into it now because it deserves its own video. I stumbled on the description of this method when I was experimenting with cycling methods. Remember the contraceptive called Seasonale or Seasonal? I know it seems like such a long time ago when we still had to worry about getting pregnant, and now we have to worry about other things. Anyway, Seasonal was a contraceptive that operated on inducing a quarterly period. So you took an active pill for 84 days. This contained synthetic progesterone and estrogen. Then you took the placebo pill for 7 days, inducing the withdrawal bleeding. And I thought, why can't we do something similar in menopause with bioidentical hormones? And I found this study from 1994 titled Cyclic Hormone Replacement Therapy Using Quarterly Progestin, which assessed how safe it is to use estrogen for 3 months and then only add progesterone for the last 2 weeks. And by safe, we mean to avoid the abnormal thickening of the uterine lining. The researchers concluded that it was safe because it didn't produce any more endometrial hyperplasia, that's Latin for abnormally thick uterine lining, than what occurred anyway in those women at the baseline. They also concluded that, quote, women preferred the quarterly regimen by nearly 4-to-1. No shit. Then I found another study, also from 1994, titled Assessment of Less Than Monthly Progestin Therapy in Postmenopausal Women Given Estrogen Replacement. And it came to the same conclusion, namely that it's safe to take estrogen only for 2.5 months and add progesterone in the last 2 weeks. As a side note, there were tons of studies dealing with HRT in the 90s. Like a plethora of awesome questions being investigated. And nowadays, nothing, or not much. And it's not like anyone cracked this nut. There's even a lot more research to do now that bioidenticals have entered the scene, and we have other delivery routes available too. But I guess researchers aren't given any money to continue this work because I'll let you finish that thought. And now the meat of this video, how I do it. First of all, I use bioidentical estrogen and progesterone, and as for the delivery route, I prefer the gel for estrogen and the micronized progesterone capsule inserted vaginally. Yes, you can absolutely use this as a suppository as opposed to swallowing it, and it is my personal preference to do it this way. Not because I like shoving things up my hoo-ha, but because the absorption rate is much better and there are other factors too. Both of these are available in regular pharmacies, no compounding needed. In my case, even my insurance pays for it. I don't know about yours, but if it covers HRT, most likely it will pay for these 2 items. The estrogen packets come in many different dosages. For the sake of simplicity, I use the 0.5 milligram and the 1 milligram dosage. The progesterone capsules, unfortunately, only come in 2 doses, 100 milligrams and 200 milligrams. On day 1, that is after the previous bleeding has completely stopped, I start with a 0.5 milligram packet. I do this for about 3 days. Then I do the 1 milligram packet for 3 days. Then I do both the 0.5 and the 1 milligram packets for the rest of the 3 months. In my case, this gives me an estradiol level of about 90 picograms per milliliter, which is pretty decent and works for me. 2 weeks before the end of the 3 months, I start the 100 milligrams of progesterone, and then after a week, I switch to the 200 milligram capsule. Then I stop both the progesterone and the estrogen, and within 2 to 3 days, I start bleeding.
There will be blood.
At any rate, what you get, at least in my case, is a lighter and shorter bleeding than what my menstrual periods used to be. When I told my gynecologist that I switched to this method from the static, he was like, "Why the heck do you want to bleed? Aren't you glad that you're done with it?" He has a good sense of humor. Well, it's not that I want to bleed. That's not the point. The point is the benefits of unopposed estrogen, i.e. estrogen without progesterone. And if you take unopposed estrogen, you must at one point induce a shed to clear out your uterine lining. But to me, it's worth it. And I will discuss next week what I found in studies, i.e. what estrogen without progesterone can do for you. That's it for now. And if you have any questions about what I described, please feel free to ask in the comments. And I'll see you next week.